First of all, somebody in the back of the room, can you hear Ari with Mike? Is the mic coming through okay?
Yeah, fine.
Since Brad was telling stories, I'm going to start off with a story as well. Also kind of looks at this whole work zone safety issue, and it was actually from a safety book that was written back in the early 1950s, and it talked about this boy who was killed off of the shore, I believe it was off the Carolinas, by a shark attack, which is rare. And of course it made national news. It was known everywhere. Everything that had happened, every detail, and so forth. The very next day, off the very same shores, another young boy died of drowning. It didn't even make the obituary page. That's what we face in terms of work zones. We don't kill people 30, 40, or 100 at a time in airplanes, but we're killing 100 of them each year. 5% of our workforce of the construction workforce is in work zones, but they're 10% of our deaths, which means construction, which we all think of as being dangerous, it's even more dangerous for highway, street, and bridge construction workers. So that's kind of where we're coming from. I have to tell you, I'm one of those guys now. First of all, Mr. Toole, I'm sorry, but I didn't get the memo on the federal, and there ain't no way I'm wearing. But I am glad to see that even within your own workforce, you haven't got everybody converted yet. So, that being said, we do still have to put up these disclaimers that says everything I tell you really doesn't have the backing of the agency. It's just me talking off my head. As well as the fact that we're going to mention some company names and products, maybe, and if we do, well, we don't really need to. Thought I'd start with a little video. Okay, maybe I'll start with a video. I love technology. It played on my computer. No, it should be copied over too. Pardon me for a moment while I try to figure out a way to make this happen. Bear with us. The video file is right there. Okay. You don't have to change your numbers. Sorry, I'm a difficult speaker, I guess. I'll need you. You know, they say in comedy, timing is everything, and boy, am I blown. Essentially, with this video, you got the guy sitting there, and you got beep, 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 and he is slamming on the alarm clock. And then that's what happens. And then you question whether backup alarms are enough. Let's see if this one works. This probably won't work either. All right. Don't worry. I'll narrate this one without it moving. But the issue is that we're always backing up within the work zones. This is just a camera that we put on back of the dump truck, backing towards the paver, and it highlights one of the people who is at risk, which of course is even the guy who's directing the dump truck back. Now, if he's at risk, keep in mind two things. The driver knows he's there, and he knows the driver's looking at him. But we still back over spotters. A little bit about what I'm going to talk about. Brad talked briefly a little bit about what NIOSH was. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we do, what we've been doing, and why we are here, and then we're going to follow up on the equipment blind areas. As Brad mentioned, we were born out of the OSH Act back in 1969. It was formed in 1971 and I get to find out how old we are. How many people here know what HUE is? Anybody know HUE? Health, Education, and Welfare? Okay, so I'm older than you guys, huh? Okay, so we were recently put in Health, Education, and Welfare we're now currently housed within Health and Human Services and actually within the Centers for Disease Control. This is what we were mandated to do under the OSH Act, which is to develop recommendations for mine health. I'm sorry. We're going to skip that. Because we also absorb the mining research activity as well. We are the federal agency responsible for conducting research and making recommendations for prevention of all work-related injury and illness. You're going to see that we have a really large staff to work in all types of workplaces. We have about 1,400, and actually that number's probably dwindled quite a bit since then because we've been replacing people as they retire. So we're probably closer to about 1,100. And we're responsible for doing research on every hazardous job within the United States. You can see the location of our offices. The research that we've been involved with primarily been out of our Morgantown Division of Safety Research, as well as our Pittsburgh Research Lab, which was formerly the Bureau of Mines, and our Spokane Research Lab, which was part of the Bureau of Mines. Now we're looking at preventing workers from being backed over by construction equipment. It makes sense that we teamed up with our partners within our agency in mining because they have the same issues we do, only their equipment's even bigger. A little bit about what we do within the Division of Safety Research. One thing is we count dead and dismembered bodies within all different occupations. That fancy term for that is occupational surveillance. And then we have a group that goes out and does fatality investigations after someone has been killed to try to find some similarities between different types of fatalities so that we make recommendations from preventing similar types of fatalities in the future. These are the target areas that we've been involved in since the late 90s. One of them has been work zones. We also are doing some research on trying to take some things that seem like good ideas and actually try them on construction sites and see if they really are good ideas or whether they should go back in the research paper they were originally written on and maybe we need to try something else in work zones. So that's what brought myself, and I can't help it, but target Jennifer Beaupre as well, who's been involved with me in this through the whole process. But it's what's taken us out on the work sites to actually see the process, to try some of the things that have been recommended to make work zones safer, and work with contractors and workers on contract crews to see if, A, can we even do them at all, and B, if we do them at all, do they do any good? One of the things we needed to do is we needed to have a way of assessing if we're going to try something and see if it's any good, we need some measure of risk. In order to have a measure of risk, we need to know what are the things that are likely to make someone run over by a piece of equipment. One thing that came to me right away was, and I'm going to run to every equipment operation manual on that site, and I'm going to flip through that operator's manual, and I'm going to find something that tells me what the operator can and cannot see. Sounds good, right? You're all laughing because obviously I was a naive researcher who didn't have a clue. Because there are international standards for these, and we're going to talk about those this afternoon, but those international standards don't ever make it into the operator's manual, which means you don't have them for your operators, let alone for the guys that you have working around equipment. So this is a project where we did that, where we went out to sites, we tried something on one site, didn't try it on another, and see if it made a difference in the amount of time that workers were actually occupying those blind areas around construction equipment. So what I'm going to talk about today was not really intended to be a research product, it was actually a research tool for us, which was how do you measure blind areas. Before I get into that a little bit more, because I have a little reward for those of you who stayed till the bitter end, how many of you are either contractors or work directly for contractors? A little higher. Keep them up. Okay, your hands go down. Now, how many of you who are not contractors actually train contract crews, either for insurance companies or whatnot? Okay, and then how many of you work for state agencies where you have responsibility for the safety of your state workers? Okay, I have an auction for all of you guys at the end. So that means you don't want to walk out early. One of the things I really want to emphasize is we could not have done what we had done. We could not have even gotten out on job sites without the cooperation of all the people in that red box. And I'm greatly indebted to the American worker who builds our infrastructure. We have seen what you all do. I'm very proud of the work that you do. Most people who go over the roads haven't got a clue what it takes to put that asphalt down or to build that bridge or to do whatever it is that you do. I have an inkling after spending 300 days on the asphalt in a 3-year period. This is the fatality numbers for 2003 through 2006. We had 130 or so workers who were killed in 2003 in highway, street, and bridge construction. That number climbed a little bit, up almost to 160 in 2005. Keep in mind, this is on a background map of about 1,000, 1,100, maybe 1,200 deaths within the construction industry as a whole, and roughly 5,000 to 5,500 deaths in all workplaces as a whole. That gets back to my original point. By the way, the danger in work zones was brought home to me 2 years ago when I probably got as close to meeting my maker as I wish to, but it's one of the things you guys face. We were working in California on a job site, and it was a 2-lane road that was being built into a divided highway. So we're on the new section where there is no traffic. So you have 2-lane traffic just the way it had always been. Somebody in their great wisdom decided they were going to pass a whole line of cars. Head-on collision. Jennifer's on the ground. I'm standing next to her. We're eating our lunch with the whole paving crew, and she yells, "Run." I hate to admit that I didn't care about anybody else. I just ran. I didn't help her up, sorry. I didn't do anything. I just ran. But when I looked over my shoulder, I saw a pickup truck coming at me, hood over rear bumper, hood over rear bumper. Probably was within 150 feet of actually getting to feel what that pickup truck would feel like. So that's what we're dealing with in work zones, aside from the blind areas. That's some of what feeds into these numbers. But that being said, when I got started in this whole research project, that's what I talked to contractors about, and that's what they talked about, is the danger of the traffic. The reason I bring that up is because 39% of all workers in the industry are killed by being struck by vehicle equipment, 42% are trucks. I don't remember if this is... And essentially, half of all those workers struck by vehicle or equipment are not struck or killed by a motorist going by, but by our own equipment. Average 22 fatalities per year. Half of these involve dump trucks. Backing accounts for at least half of the deaths involving a dump truck. Being struck by vehicles and equipment continued throughout the recent years to be a leading cause of death in highway, street, bridge construction. And right now, trucks and construction equipment account for about 60% of worker deaths within your industry. We, as I mentioned, have a fatality assessment and control evaluation program where we go and we evaluate different fatality events. This shows the states across the country where we have what we call our in-house program, which you see in blue. In orange, and then we have our state cooperative program, which we have in blue. But every state in the union, we've done at least one fatality investigation. I'm going to go through one of them now because it makes a particular point about blind areas around construction. Raise your hand if you don't know that directly behind a dump truck is a blind area. Good. How many of you worry about the front of your truck, though? This was a fatality where you had a Cotting Road coming up on a state road. You can kind of see what the scene was here. And then I've made a diagram of what actually happened. So you have the paver working in this direction. You have the roller here. The victim was working on the shoulder. This is where the asphalt would spill over onto the curb, and you're pulling it off the curb to keep your curb clean. I guess he caught up to the paver. It was a hot day. This was in Virginia, and sometime in the summer. It could have been hotter in other places. Believe me, I know that. But for whatever reason, he wanted to take a break. We're guessing, because you can't ask people after they've died why they did what they did, but we're guessing that he wanted to come over to these trees, which happen to be where the water cooler was sitting and all those sorts of things. So he comes around the front end of the paver and then walks down the center line. Now, when I first described this seemed outlandish to me. But now that I've been out on the job site, I've done that same move I don't know how many times myself. Okay? Well, when the dump truck finished dumping into the paver, he went down, he did his K-turn, and then he came back. Now, one of the things that he's looking at is he's got a flagger that's going to let him into traffic up here. He's also watching his mirror to make sure that he doesn't clip too close to the crew. For whatever reason, he didn't see the victim standing right here. That's again general the scene. You see the truck. Now I'm going to show you the view from the driver position. We have here a lot of things that were cluttering up the visual view that you wouldn't think of being out of the normal. You had a fan put on the dash. You have the wide door post. He's looking over towards the mirror. You have your regulatory stickers, which actually raises an interesting question about where we should put those, by the way. And then right off the front, if you notice, and if you've heard me present, you've seen me do this before, but right off the front is a reconstruction of the accident. A worker with the same baseball cap sitting right there. And you'd have to know he was there to be looking for him. We've generally found that workers in the field don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the front end of the truck. They don't even think about the front of the truck. And the prime example of that is whoever's going to get tickets, load tickets out of the dump truck driver, invariably will walk within 2 feet of the front of the truck. We're going to talk about that a little bit more as we get into the blind areas. So as we're looking at trying to be able to evaluate how to prevent workers from being run over by equipment, we had to characterize the hazard itself, and we started with blind areas. As a suit and tie, I have to give definitions that probably not necessary, but blind area is the area around a vehicle, piece of construction equipment that is not visible to operators either by direct line of sight or indirectly by the use of the mirror. So that's what we're talking about. My whole concept for trying to understand this a little better came from a Navy training manual from somewhere in the 50s, maybe even older than that. It was a torn out page out of a manual. I can't find the original source. But it was a very simple diagram that had a planar view that showed the outline of a piece of equipment, and the areas on gray are the area where the operator couldn't see the ground. So I wanted these for every piece of equipment that we would be in contact with during our research. Found out that there's an International Organization Standards method, 5006, for doing just what I want. In fact, all equipment manufacturers use it. It is a design constraint. They like to be able to limit the amount of poor visibility on their equipment. They just don't share it with those of us who use that equipment. And then we developed our own method, which I'll talk about a little bit more, which is something that contractors can use themselves if they want to. I don't know how much you really want to make your own blind area diagrams for your own equipment, but I think it's a cool idea of a way that you can train some of your workers as to what your blind areas really are. And those workers might not be who you might think you need to train on the piece of equipment. You might think the operators. I'm thinking it's more the ground workers who work around those operators, because it doesn't take 6 months for an operator to know what he can see and can't see. But in 6 months, your ground worker may not have a clue what your operator can and cannot see. So for what that's worth. Then there's some other methods here we'll go through. Manual light bar method by the ISO standard basically uses a light bulb to create a shadow. Actually, they're twin filaments. I wish the angle had been a little bit different so you can see too, but they're this far apart. So you can tell that they're representing your eyes. Okay? And that light bar is on an apparatus that's allowed to turn like my head is turning. Okay? And it can slide like my head is sliding. And that's what it's supposed to replicate. It will cast a shadow on the ground. Those areas that are in shadow are areas the eyes cannot see the ground. And the standard is for ground level. We think that maybe it was interesting to learn a little bit more, not just about ground level, because there aren't many of us that lay down behind dump trucks while they're backing. I was actually doing this because we were testing a radar system and we wanted to see if it really would pick me up on the ground, which it did. And even if it hadn't, I would have moved before I got close. But there are other positions that workers are in that may be of interest, such as bent over. This is in taking a measurement. Or in this case, you've got someone who's leaning over, who's operating the switch on the belly dump. So we looked at developing blind areas for 3 different levels. Ground level, 900 millimeters, which equates to barrel height, in 1500 millimeters, which is the 95th percentile female shoulder. About 4 feet 9 inches. In fact, you'll see me have a slide that says about 5 feet. So that's blind error diagrams using that method for those levels for a Ford 880. To give you an idea, to orient around here, and we'll look at one of these in a little more detail. And because I'm getting old, my eyesight's bad, I have to look a little bit closer. Ground level, you cannot see out here for 11 meters, right there. I'm not too worried about if you're running over a worker at ground level. I'm a little more interested in this one. And even here, from where the driver sits, go ahead and subtract what I'm going to tell you about 2 meters, because that's about how far out the hood is. But from where your driver sits, you've got about 6 meters. Okay, so you take 2 from 6, you've got 4 meters in front of the bumper of that truck, where you should never let a worker get. And as many times as we've been out on job sites, we've had them say, we never let a worker get behind a dump truck and a paver. How many of you think that's true? How many of you think that is a standard policy? Only one person thinks it's a standard policy. Every single contractor we worked with, that was their policy. Every single contractor we worked with, that policy was violated. Okay, so that's kind of what we're getting at here. So you're looking at, going out to about 6 meters. The yellow represents where you can see with the mirrors, the side mirrors. Of course, with the dump truck, the rear view mirror is irrelevant. For other pieces of equipment, you would also have diagrams that would show what they can see out of their main mirror versus their side mirrors. But these are the side mirrors. First thing you should notice is, man, that's a small percentage of that area that's covered by those mirrors. And I don't think your workforce really understands that. You know, I tell workers when we're involved in training with them, if you can't see the eyes of the operator, they can't see you. Just because you're in the position of the mirror doesn't mean that the driver sees you. I'd love to know, and we don't have the details, the proportion of backovers where the worker's on this side, because every driver I saw drives with his backs with his left-hand mirror. We've worked in asphalt. If you're not backing to a paver in asphalt, then it may be different. Maybe their concentration is mostly on the right side mirror, depending on what they're doing. But the way the system is set up, they do all their backing on their left-hand side, with maybe an occasional look over to the right-hand side. I do know of a couple of fatalities that we've been involved in that have involved workers on the right rear side of the truck. Just to show that we aren't the only ones with the problem, we also contracted to have blind error diagrams done on a variety of pieces of mining equipment. And those blind errors are a whole lot bigger. And in that case of surface mining, how many of you know anything about surface mining? Anybody? Okay, so you guys can relate to this. They really aren't worried about running over people the size of me. They're worried about flattening things the size of pickup trucks. That's how much bigger we're talking about in terms of blind area of that versus something like an asphalt dump truck. That being said, if you're into heavy construction and you're moving a lot of dirt on job sites, you're using some of that same equipment. And we have some diagrams, for example, for a Volvo A40D, just to give you an idea. We decided that we couldn't afford to pay a contractor to do all the pieces of equipment we need, so we needed our own method, so we developed a manual method. You can see us out there in the rain doing it. You can see these circles on the ground, which represent just coordinate system. And then we put an operator in the cab, and then we hold a staff, which I'm holding right there, and we say, can you see the bottom of the staff? Can you see a mark 900 millimeters up or 1500 millimeters up so that we can develop our own diagrams? So again, this is just us doing that, and we mark it on a grid like this. If you want to know the details of how we do that, I'll show you the website where you can get that, and you can contact me as well. This is the first one I did. It was on a CAT 627CH. And you can get as fine with this as you want. The international standards you won't see have these extensions because there's a minimum blind area size that can be ignored by your equipment manufacturers when they develop their blind area diagrams. So then we took our method and put it next to theirs. You can see they're not exactly the same. These are the window and door posts sticking out, which were small enough not to be included here. We actually got a better mirror coverage on the right-hand side than the setup the Caterpillar had. But in general, you're seeing the same sort of thing. Okay, now if you're an equipment manufacturer that has the design files, you can actually do this all in the computer. And in fact, that's how Caterpillar did a lot of the blind area diagrams for us, and I'll show you where you get access to those. But essentially, you locate your machine in the model, you generate an eye point, you're essentially doing the same sort of idea, only in the computer rather than in a great big warehouse, with computer points rather than lights. You simulate the light blockages and where the mirrors will project, and then you plot that out. That's what a diagram looks like for a roller. Now, when you guys were thinking, and as I started, and we're talking about blind areas and dump trucks, how many of you thought I was going to show you a blind area of a roller? I have one. I don't believe it. That's not fair. Maybe you did. I'm not exactly sure why I did it, but now that I got out on job sites, I really like this slide because it gives me a chance to emphasize something. If I'm a roller operator and I'm rolling this seam on this left-hand side, this entire right-hand side is blind. And your workers need to think of it that way. Because again, my focus is on this. So if you walk up behind a roller operator on the opposite side, that's probably not a good thing. And yet we see that out on job sites as well. So one of the things I'm trying, as I talk about this, I'm trying to throw out little tidbits as to some ways I think some of this information can be used, and I'll talk about that some more. We also said, well, we tried, believe me, we tried to get Caterpillar to give us their machine files. We tried to get John Deere to give us machine files. We tried to get Volvo to give us machine files. They all said they would, but I've yet to see one. So we said, well, how else can I get a computer drawing of a machine? So we went out and we scanned this loader. Inside and out, we created our own model. You can see it in various forms. And then we put it in the virtual reality lab. Now I throw this out not as something that you're going to do or that we're going to do. We actually stopped doing this, but we proved that it can be done. And so, you know, this might be a cheaper way than the number of man hours to actually manually plot them, which is what we did with Caterpillar's stuff. But again, you can, here's me and my buddy, actually me and my buddy, working on doing it in the real world, and here's the staff equivalent of my survey staff. So it can be done in the virtual world. Digital photo modeling, I think, can also be done. How many of you bought a house in the last 5 years? A few. Okay. Did any of you see that house before you ever drove up to it? Did any of you see it online? There's some really nice 3D models that will let you take a complete tour of the house, and they're getting better and better every day. Well, we decided we're going to try to do the same thing, use that same software, and we hired a contractor to do this for us, and basically he took photographs from inside the cab, and then used software to stitch them together, and he failed. But I put this in because I see no reason it can't be done. In fact, when we get the photographs from him, we have a graduate student who gives me about a 95% guarantee that he can do it. But we don't have any of that to show. But that is something that maybe you could do at a contractor or state agency level. All right, Dave, you've done a lot of work, so what did you get out of it? Well, we have contract reports that show these, and we've had these for a number of years. And they're documents this thick, and so I bring like 2 or 3 to a conference because, you know, now they charge you for every ounce that you carry on an airplane. So, yeah, we didn't get very good distribution of that way, and, you know, expensive to print in color and all that, so we were looking for a better way. So we found that. These are some sample pages out of that contract report for a dump truck, and I can't see it there for a loader. Fairly good sized loader at that. Just for the funsies of it. Anybody have an idea why that one right there? Going once, going twice. Why the blind area right there? It's a funny shape. Stack. But we now have this up on the web for about 34, 37 different pieces of equipment. This is our Highway Work Zone Safety page. It has a variety of information. We try to keep it up to date with some of the other things that are going on. So like in subpart J, subpart K, we're out, we kind of threw those in. The visibility rule is out there, as well as what we're doing at NIOSH. And there's a section called Construction Equipment Visibility. And that's going to take you to a page where you can pick a type of equipment. And then once you pick a type of equipment, this one is for a shuttle buggy. You can pick a model of equipment based on what we have. We only have one shuttle buggy, for example. And you can pull up the actual blind areas at those 3 levels. I have another question for you all. I'm going to give you 3 choices. I just wonder what you think would be the most useful one to use. Ground level, barrel height, or shoulder height. Okay? I'm going to ask for, this is voting time. I'm going to ask for a show of hands. How many people think that of those 3, the most useful information is ground level? How many think barrel height? Okay? And how many think shoulder height? Okay. If I were to drop one, how many would say drop the ground level? How many would say drop the shoulder level? Okay. And virtually no one would say drop the barrel height level. It seems like the barrel height level, which is what my gut feeling was, is probably the most useful. Unfortunately, the international standards, even if we do get these kinds of diagrams into operator manuals, all are at ground level. So I think there's some work to be done there. You can also get all the gory details on the ISO standard, as well as the reference back to where you can purchase the ISO standard. And then you can also get the information on how you can do this yourself with your own equipment in the most expensive thing we had there was the box of children's chalk that I bought. And boy, that was fun to get through federal procurement. A couple other products that we have been done by Todd Ruff out of our Spokane research lab. One of which is evaluating systems, monitor blind areas. Another one's recommendations for evaluating and implementing proximity warning systems. This publication has the mining diagrams in them. But the mining diagrams, there are 5 or 6 pieces. There's a shovel and a couple of haul trucks and a couple of other things. I think there are about 5 pieces of mining equipment that we've done. They are not on the website yet. They're being approved to be put on the website. Should be there within a month or so. And I'm going to use Todd's work as a segue into, well, what are different ways we can use this blind area information? One of the ways is when we're evaluating systems for aiding the driver in knowing what's behind him, whether it's a radar system, a sonar system, or a camera system. You would like that system to cover the blind area for your piece of equipment. Now, if you have a radar system, it has a basic detection area. What you'd like to do beyond that is tune that detection area for your specific piece of equipment. You know, if you tilt it a little bit down or a little bit up, if you misalign it, you're not going to get quite the detection zone. So if you know the blind area, then you can go ahead and match up your detection zones with your blind area. I think that's important. We've used the blind area demonstrations at World of Asphalt a couple years ago at ConExpo, just to try to raise the general awareness of the whole issue of working around operating pieces of equipment. As part of one of our interventions, we provide a training to paving foremen for them to develop internal traffic control plans. And I'm going to talk more about that on Thursday. And part of that is this little exercise that we do with the hazards of working around operating equipment. And we have this little handout here that incorporates the blind area, which is what you see in gray, incorporates the mirrors, which are crosshatched, also the turning radius. To again put in the minds of your workers that, you know, the dump truck here, you can be standing on the right-hand side beside it in the middle of the frame and it can't run you over. because trucks don't go sideways. But if you're standing in the same spot on a front unloader that's articulated, you're in trouble. Okay? Not that we're recommending people stand on the blind side of a dump truck. It's just to make the point that you need to take into consideration the operating speed, the direction of travel, whether it's articulated or not, what its turning radius are. These are all things that we ought to be considering when we're walking and working around pieces of machinery. The next one is you can take these drawings and you can scale them. You can get these fairly cheaply. You can go ahead and put your drawing to scale, and then you can make it part of your training program about where specifically you really want. And unfortunately, I don't have a base stand for him, so he's got to lay down. But it's really where you want your workers to stand. Where do you want them doing their spotting from? What do you want set up as worker-free zones around different pieces of equipment? And we'll talk about worker-free zones in the internal traffic control plan on Thursday, but again, as a training tool, this is just something I did as a flash of a thought. We did it at World of Asphalt 2 years ago, and I had 4 or 5 contractors contacting me afterwards asking for these for different pieces of equipment, because at that point we didn't have them on the web. So we have them on the web. You can download them and scale them to whatever piece of equipment that you might have. This is another one. I left my toy behind, so I don't have that to show, but this is the diagram for grader. Again, 2 scale. This one's a 1 to 50 scale, and I think dump truck there is 1 to 32 scale. So you can actually scale it roughly. All you need to know is your basic dimensions of your vehicle that you're doing. Okay, there's my contact information. If anybody has any questions on this, and Brad wants me to talk for another 20 minutes, but not going to happen. But I do have something that I am going to do. For those of you, my right hand told me that it might be good to put the website back up there, so I'll do that. www.cdc.gov/NIOSH/topics/highway work zones. Now, if you just go as far as topics, you're going to get a whole list of everything from construction to asphalt fumes to whatever we might have at NIOSH. So it's actually a good place to go in directly to get to a kind of a list of those. And again, with the highway work zones, we'll get you to the equipment visibility. I told you that I had a little trouble getting the children's chalk through federal procurement. Well, I also got called into the office one day when, first of all, back up the story. I went to Con Expo and I bought a excavator, a little scale model, die-cast model excavator. And I wanted to see if we could scan it to start this process of, can we scan a real piece of equipment? Can we work it through on a small level? Well, I also have a son who at that point was 4 years old, so I think, well, here's a cool toy for my son. Not a big deal. I'll spend my own personal money and I'll buy this. So I did that. And then the people scanning it said, the shininess is a little bit of a problem. Can we bust it apart and spray paint it gray and put it back together again? Well, okay, if that's what it's going to take, I'll do that. Yeah, okay. So I went to order a replacement for my son. And I got called into the boss's office, and the boss's office. And I was told that there would be no more toys bought on the Work Zone project. Well, you're going to see that I've bought a bunch more toys on Thursday if you're here on Thursday. Because I found them to be very useful for a variety of things. And we actually use them in our training of the paving foreman. And we'll give you a little taste of that on Thursday. So, the treat for you guys that are here is those of you who raise your hand as being contractor or training contract crews or state agency being responsible for, if you will take your business card and hand it to the center aisle, please. And Omar is going to come and collect them, and I'm going to raffle off, if you will, my dump truck and blind air diagram. Which is sort of back to the story of throwing one starfish into the sea, which is, it may not make much impact, but if you will use it in some way to emphasize the importance of being careful around operating equipment, then I would appreciate it. Now, those of you coming on Thursday are going to see a lot more toys, but I'm not raffling them all off. Should I mention that if you adhere to that federal agency high visibility memo, that you don't qualify? Okay, going once, going twice. We got them all. Last chance. Who do you want to draw the one?
I don't know if this is legal.
No problem.
That wasn't my shot.
Was that yours or was that his?
That was.
Wait, let's see. Who's on? No, I don't think so. Okay, with that, Omar. Good spirit. And the winner is, from the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, Nikki Hunter. And we'll give you that too once we roll it up. Any questions while we wrap up here?
Will you please step to the microphone so we can capture your voice?
What's your sense in terms of run-over type accidents where people were standing, the percentages of where people were standing where the driver could have seen them or should have seen them, but just didn't because he was concentrating on something else? I mean, it's a typical type of crash you see where people run into the side, railroad crossing or run over a pedestrian or bicyclist that they should have seen.
Excellent question. I haven't got a clue. Unfortunately, the data is not good enough to give us really any sort of an idea. But one of the things I also do, another trick you can do with workers if you have a big enough group, is often at a conference like this, I'll pick somebody and I'll look right at them, and no, I'm not going to do it right now, but I'll look right at somebody and I say, who am I looking at? And I'm only looking at one set of eyes, but I'll get 4 or 5 hands. And the point that I make is just because an equipment operator is facing you, doesn't mean that they're not looking at whatever's behind you or whatever's in front of you. So it's a very good point. We don't know what the data is on that. In fact, I don't even know how many are on the right rear side of the truck where the driver's probably not looking versus the left rear side of the truck, because that's not in the fatality data. Other questions?
I'm Jim Bryden. I'm a highway safety consultant. Been in this business for a long time and worked with Dave over the years on a lot of this stuff. I'd just like to add a comment that will add a little reinforcement to the importance of what Dave is saying. One of the things that gets a lot of my time these days is expert witness work with construction accidents and traffic accident cases and so on. In the past several years, I've been involved in a number of backing accidents, either fatalities or very serious injuries involving workers that were backed over by equipment. I've been on both the plaintiff side and the defense side of several of these cases. Obviously, we don't want to be injuring or killing our workers out there just because of the value of human life, but the other part of it that's very, very important to consider is the financial cost of these accidents. Based on my experience, if a worker is backed over in a work zone, a lawsuit is going to come out of it, and that's going to be unwinnable on the defense side. You're not going to be able to defend those cases. So it's going to cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on the jurisdiction you're in. And even when the worker maybe did something stupid that they shouldn't have done, the chances of defending that type of accident are minimal. So if protecting the life isn't enough, think of the financial cost that's going to come out of these. And believe me, you're going to pay if you have one of these accidents on your work site.
And the other thing to consider is how fast they happen. And some of the kinds of things that can lead to some of these things happening. I'll tell another story on myself, which was end of a workday, really tired. We wound up with a problem. I was trying to get a lot done so I could get off-site. And I'm running around getting all of our equipment off the paving equipment. And I would be danged if I didn't walk like this close to the back end of a skid steer that was operating. Didn't move towards me. I was fully behind it before I went, geez, what the hell did I just do? Okay? And here I am focusing 100% on this topic. And if that was in the first 6 months that I've been in the field, then I could give the excuse that, well, you know, I'm a naive researcher that doesn't belong out on the job site. But in fact, this was in the 3rd year of my being out there. And I am pretty aware of what's going on. So it isn't just your inexperienced workers who are at risk. It's also your guys. And just to underscore that one more time, I got a call, the call I never want to get, from a contractor that I've worked with a lot, who I have a lot of respect for, who's really trying very hard. And he says, Dave, you won't believe this. I had somebody backed over by a water truck. Is there anything you can give us that you haven't already given us? We're going to do a company stand down, try to do something different. Well, what's of note for that particular company is that guy actually fined his crew for violating safety rules. He actually fined his crew for occupying blind areas behind equipment. He was a foreman with 32 years experience. If anyone in that company was safety conscious, it was him. And he walked behind a backing water truck. So that's the other point that I want to note out, is a lot of the work we're doing through our alliance in developing the work zone awareness training that you're going to hear more about, I guess, tomorrow, really is kind of an orientation towards those who don't have a lot of experience in the work zone. But do what you can to help stop those of you who have got lots of experience, who are the leaders in your companies, and make sure that they stop and think about this whole issue themselves. And what might we do differently? How do we need to pay better attention to things like close calls and those sorts of things so that they don't happen